Good evening. Welcome to the After Hours Show, the Autonomous Collective. My name is Joe in Norway, farm boy in Norway. I've relocated to rural Western Norwegian hinterlands, and I'm joined by Anne Lee here somewhere. Let me get her spotlight. There we go. Anne, good evening.
Hey there. Hey there.
Hey. Anne's a retired college professor and community member at the Daily Kos. She is a member of the National Council of Independent Scholars and is a contributor to the book, The Political Economy of Art, Making the Nation of Culture. Evening, Anne.
Hey, Joe. How's it going? What's for supper?
Well, I've been better, but we're going to try to do a take two on the fishtekokke with gooseberries that I meant to do last week. But I was caught out in the wilds doing a 10K hike. But I followed that the day after by throwing myself down the stairs. So I definitely will. I made it here, so I won't. A little worse for wear, but
Gotta stop breaking those bones there, Joe.
Telling you. So what I'll be making today, before you get going on the Ukraine update and rant, is a traditional cake here in Norway, originated in Belgium, called fishtekokke, which is prince's cake, princely cake, essentially a shortbread tart filled with a kind of frangipani or almond sort of marzipan filling. And usually it looks like this, where it's got a dough lattice on top. But what I'm going to do, it's very rich cake, and the almond is too sweet. So what I'm going to do is cut it with some fresh gooseberries that we have here. Do I have my share on there as well, or no?
No, you're not.
Oh, where'd I go?
We're not.
There we go. And
Shall I remove?
There we go.
There we go. There we go.
So we've got gooses, geeses. We got berries coming out of our ears here. We've got loads and loads. We've got green and red gooseberries. So I'm going to tart the sweetness of it up with the arrangement of gooseberries, and the tartness of the berries will cut the marzipan sweetness. One thing about this cake that I learned about during the war, it was such an expensive luxury cake back in the day that in Trondheim, a famous bakery that used to make it, they would box it, and it would be sold in a wooden box with brass hinges. That's how exclusive it was. The sugar and the almonds cost so much. But during the war, WW2, they substituted the almonds they substituted almonds with potato and almond essence. which I thought was cool. Maybe I'll try that one of these days. Um,
Mm.
so it's essentially a shortbread crust with egg. But since we do 100% vegetarian meals on the After Hours show, I'll be doing a kind of chia booger egg. So I've had chia soaking in some oat milk here, and I'll grind that up. So it'll give us somewhat of the texture of egg. My last experiment, it didn't get too crispy, so I'm going to try some other variations with semolina and maybe cornstarch or potato meal or something like that. Um, that was that. See, we've got some ingredients which we'll go over later. Oh, just wanted to thank Nancy for suggesting I make uh, thinning out that I needed to thin out the plum trees, which I did. I felt bad. They're just little tiny plums, and we have such a short growing season. But oh my God, the jam is so good. It it looks kind of like pond, pond jelly, but very tart. It's super tart, but mellowed by the sugar, and it has a bitter edge, which is kind of nice for some of us like that. But yeah, very nice jam. I think I may actually thin more of it because I prefer this over the ripened plums. So I think that's it. Sound good?
Look forward to it.
Yeah, I'll get going then. Oh, you can since I got to bake, I have to assemble and then bake it. So you can just go as
Yammer on.
slow. You can draw as much as you want.
I can yammer as much as I want. Well, that's a good and a bad thing. It's been a very busy week, needless to say, in the United States. For some weird reason, Trump was being accused in the mainstream media that he hadn't been doing anything, sitting at home, not being out at the road. I think he was laying low because, of course, there was a dominant news in the United States of the choice of Tim Walz as the vice presidential candidate for the Democratic Party. So, on the one hand, I think Trump was just playing golf on the one hand, and of course, doing his usual social media posting, trolling, and of course, allowing his running mate JD Vance to run around and say very stupid things, running onto the tarmac when his plane landed opposite Air Force Two in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and he decided he would try and troll, appropriate some sort of photo op with Air Force Two. Air Force Two is well, technically, the call sign is corresponds to the occupant, the passenger, but this Air Force Two, it's a smaller jet than the large 747B or whatever Boeing jet that the president uses. The vice president generally uses a uh, an outfitted B-757, which is actually identical to the one Trump, well, whatever. It's a similar model to the 757, Boeing 757 that Trump uses, which actually had to make an emergency landing today in Billings, Montana. I think it was going to, was it Bozeman? I can't remember. Anyway, he had to, he, he had to stop somewhere because there was hydraulic problem. So with that we'll see whether there's something interesting related to Trump's only campaign stop in an entire week, going out to try and defeat Democratic Senator John Tester, who was being challenged by an opponent who lives in Minnesota and It's just interesting. Who is claims he's a farmer, whereas Tester actually has a real ranch and does stuff and has been doing stuff for ages. Whereas this other guy is a bit of a carpetbagger, although he's a former Navy SEAL, of course, and that swings a little weight in Montana on the one hand. So that's what's happening now. Trump made a press conference, that press conference at Mar-a-Lago, where it isn't clear which members of the press were there, and because, of course, it's at Mar-a-Lago, and is a not an official press conference in the sense of something controlled by the Election Commission or the White House Correspondents Association or anything like that. So there was likely a bunch of riffraff there. Other minor press that during the Trump administration, there were kinds of a couple of Russian outlets used to get invited to the press conferences and stuff. So needless to say, the correspondents weren't mic'd at all. So you could hardly hear the questions. In fact, you couldn't hear really the questions, but the cable networks carried it live for however long it was, at least a half an hour. And essentially Trump didn't answer questions, or he just sort of dodged them like he did in the debate with Biden, and did his usual gish gallop. That is, just sort of said what he wanted to say, which essentially resembled his rallies, where he just riffs on things and lies. Numerous fact-checking occurred, at least 10 to 20 outright lies or exaggerations. It was pretty clear that he was affected by the crowds that have been showing up for the Harris and Walz rallies, which were pretty significant. And they did resemble some of Trump's little rallies, although Trump does tend to pick smaller places, outlets to do his rallies, whether they're outdoors or indoors. There is a tendency for them to be fairly small. And of course, I think he was hurt by that he had done a couple of rallies in the same location that the Harris Walz folks had done it, and they were less well attended than the Harris Walz folks. So, and there's been enthusiasm, needless to say. The Democrats seem to be riding a wave of enthusiasm similar to the Obama 2008 sort of enthusiasm. It is hope and change in that sense. There's a kind of a positivity that is rolling along, although Harris got her first heckler, and she's handled it as well as I suppose you could, answering that if you want Trump to win, then that's your right. But it's essentially saying the same thing that Reagan said in New Hampshire. It's my microphone. She didn't say it exactly like that, but she recognizes people right to dissent, unlike Trump saying, well, beat that guy up and throw him out, sort of things, which Trump has done at several of his rallies, historically speaking. So that's kind of the thin-skinned Trump responded with a press conference that it's just weary. If you've actually heard his rallies, he essentially repeats the same strange facts that, and I won't amplify them here. They're just strange. Some of which are just extreme exaggerations in terms of crowd numbers, comparing his crowds on January 6th to that of Martin Luther King during the sort of the March in Washington, and it's just awesomely strange. And of course, there were just a couple of the usual Trump gaffes. So, you know, it is that sort of double standard, as it were, of trying to let Trump get away with no fact checking during the press conference, and very little. CNN did maybe 30 seconds of fact checking after his presser. And Lawrence O'Donnell, uh, on the other hand, did a fairly complete fact check of, and the of course the Harris Walls campaign did a fairly complete fact check as well. So you could look on the inner tubes for interwebs for that. So this the campaign continues. Walls and Harris are going together on a little, a couple of stops at the front end here. I think it's tonight or tomorrow. The first Biden Harris appearance will occur, and I'm not sure where that is. I think it's Arizona. So that's kind of what's happening. No one asked Trump about Project 2025. They should have, but no one did. And that was symptomatic, I suppose, of the quality of the press that was there at that little event. And, well, it's been a typical campaign, although we're getting I guess in a week or so, the Democratic convention occurs in Chicago, and there doesn't seem to be any rancor or division anticipated. None of the usual craziness that we might get in a normal Democratic convention. That is, some resistance from alternative candidates, et cetera. There are alternative candidates still, I think. I'm not sure whether they'll have any kind of place, since they did a virtual vote, and needless to say, Harris is the nominee. And now that she has announced her running mate, I assume there's going to be some sort of virtual vote for that. And so there'll be acclamation and speechifying. And some of us hope that some of the more mechanical elements of a Democratic National Convention might be revealed. Often the platform committee deliberations are actually very interesting, but not that anyone should be actually seeing how the sausage is made. But it is the Democratic platform shouldn't be any great problematic element. Although I'm going to assume, because the heckler that Harris had was a Israel-Gaza heckler. So that's kind of the left element, progressive element that does remain, and is I suppose slightly problematic. Although I assume that with proper planning, the Democrats have sort of adjusted that, and hopefully we'll have a segment on that built into the national convention coverage. They would do well to do that, to sort of head that off. Mainly because there always is a left defection that may defect either to third parties or some other kind of alternative that's floating out there. And in some places, you can write in candidates, in other places you can't. So this is also important. We'll see some of that as we move into the future. And so that's sort of where our politics are. The Trump people have been casting about for some way to oppose Harris and Walls. They've been trying to sell a kind of stolen valor kind of issue, which doesn't make much sense, considering that J.D. Vance saw no combat in his Iraq experience. He was a public relations guy attached to a forward deployed unit, but never himself saw combat. In the case of Walls, he's a 24-year veteran of the Army National Guard. His unit did see, I think, did see combat at some moment, but by that time, Waltz had removed himself to go run for political office. But he has served abroad with a variety of units. He's an artillery command master sergeant or master sergeant. So a lot of that work happens to be in terms of, setting up artillery batteries and those kinds of things, the kind of training that is part of sort of the American NATO obligation. So I think he spent time in France or Germany or someplace that to do that. Aside from his earlier career as a high school teacher and football coach, defensive coordinator for, I think, Mankino, Minnesota West High School. Anyway, those are the kinds of things that have happened in that case. The usual things with J.D. Vance, he hasn't really backed off of his demand that rape victims should carry their children to term. And a variety of the other disinformation, of course, that Trump continues to attach to Democrats, and of course with his extreme policies on abortion that are there and are supported, and clearly the GOP knows that and have therefore staggered or postponed the release of the 2025 project document. But there are copies of that and a variety of other things. He's attempted to disclaim any kind of connection that he has with the head of the Heritage Foundation. And then a couple days ago, another photo was leaked or appeared that showed him and the head of the Heritage Foundation sitting next to each other on a private plane. Trump's attempt to disclaim any particular kind of connection that he has with with the Project 2025 or the Heritage Foundation is a bit rich, as they say. So, but there's that stuff out there, and there's a lot of low information voters out there. There's plenty of them, and a lot of them aren't paying attention to this. And much time and money has been spent in ad buys in a variety of places. It's interesting to see how they operate. Social media is filled with a variety of interesting but problematic Trump-related ads, or PAC ads, or super PAC ads. So those are all flooding our consciousness, and of course annoying us all with falsehoods at all. So, but hopefully truth will out, etc. That's coming up soon. So this constitutes my little sort of rant of the week with the usual kind of provisos. It just is sort of the way it's becoming a kind of pitched battle between essentially left and right, with of course insurgent elements that are operative. If you will recall, in 2020, various groups, official or otherwise, attempted to disrupt the voting process or the vote counting process, and some of those elements are still being put in place. Trump doing last week a shout out to the Democratic members of the election board in the state of Georgia, who put in some sort of vague language about how ballots might be contested at the district level. So there will be attempts to slow up or make more complicated the job of simply counting ballots in this election, with all the usual disinformation associated with that. We're hoping that 2024 will not be like 2020, and whether there's going to be other insurgent events will be an interesting case. And needless to say, 2020 could just simply be a bad rehearsal for what is something more insidious, perhaps, or not. But I think people hopefully will be paying attention to that, because clearly illegal behavior occurred. People running around seizing um, voting votes, the ones that Patrick Byrne seized with his little group in upper upstate Michigan, for example, and interference attempted in Georgia et al. These things are just there. These, you can't make this stuff up. And still, there are prosecutions engaged, notably in Arizona and probably Nevada, at least, and one's coming up in Michigan for the so-called fake electors scheme of 2020. I don't think they're going to repeat that again, simply because actual people got prosecuted and are still being prosecuted. So some other attempt will probably be made with some new nuance. And many lawyers will get much work out of these kinds of activities. Looks good, Joe. Yum, yum.
Thanks. A few,
Ready to made.
I forgot that I don't have time to put the crust in the refrigerator to chill it a bit. Should have compensated for that, but anyways. So now just have to fill up the berries into the marzipan.
Yum. So off to the oven?
Oh no, after I fill it.
Oh, right.
We got loads of berries. Take your time. We're just all these.
Well, I'll yak about Ukraine now. How about that? The war changed a lot. The Ukrainians decided 3 days ago that they would launch a surprise attack. They'd actually done probing and other stuff, and they did prep the battlefield. They did what they were supposed to do, and that is attack logistical targets in the northeast part of the country. And so they're rolling an attack towards Kursk. Kursk, the Kursk Oblast or region or state, is the site of the historically most major tank battle, the biggest tank battle in history, that being during World War II, in the attempt of the Soviet army to push back the Germans, the Nazis, and the largest tank battle ensued. A variety of interesting problems related to that battle. One of the more interesting things, of course, is that the Soviets knew what the German deployment was going to be because of espionage, and so they were all prepared for the conflict. And needless to say, it was a big battle. Has other underlying historical things. There's a little bit of revisionism about it. Needless to say, it was brutal. A lot of people died. Much equipment was engaged, and you can say that the Germans lost. On the one hand, is fairly even relative to the forces deployed against each other. But anyway, that's World War II. Now, to current day, Kursk is a pretty prosperous little area, but it also has it adjoins Ukraine in an area that is sort of has been poorly supported. They tended to put, in terms of the border area, less able, let's put it that way, units, some with conscripts, prisoners, etc. And it has generally, this sort of northeast area has been underpersoned with troops, and so poorly trained troops, etc., are there. It is also the place where the Ukrainians have been probing with anti-Putin Russian troops. There's some people have switched sides, and they're interested in sort of they're patriotic Russians who want to liberate the Russian state from Putin. Needless to say, they're not a big number, but they're about a brigade-sized unit. So they're on that area. A couple of other kinds of associated units in that same area. There's a contingent from the country of Georgia, and they're quite good and well equipped, and they're in on that side as well. So there's been several decent units deployed on the Ukrainian side, complete with some air support, a lot of artillery, and they've moved in somewhere around 20 kilometers into Russia. Now, the question is whether they're going to hold the territory that they're taking. And they're only halfway to Kursk. They're still, they're only halfway to Kursk, which I think is 48 kilometers from the border. The more interesting elements of this attack include that there is a power plant that on the other side of Kursk. It's a nuclear power plant, and assuming the Ukrainians are going to hold the ground that they take, that could be an issue in terms of putting out the electrical power for about 5 million Russian residents. So that could be interesting as well, which mirrors, of course, the same element that occurred for the nuclear power plant in the south. Of Ukraine, that has been the biggest nuclear plant in all of Europe, has 5 reactors and a bunch of other things, that has been currently seized by the Russians, but at some moment that will be at risk and taken back, one assumes, with the next major Ukrainian assault. The same things have applied all week. There have been no new land taken by the Russians. And in fact, this little bit that they've taken off of Kursk Oblast of Russia, taken over by Ukrainian troops with armor, accompanied by armor, makes it even again. Somewhere around 70% of the country of sovereign Ukraine has been taken by the Russians and is occupied by them. And of course, the usual things apply. The attempt to convert people in occupied territory to Russian, handing out passports and doing all kinds of other stuff. But this one little issue here of a not so wide front of about maybe 10 kilometers or so, rushing across the border towards Kursk, is making the Russians think again, perhaps getting them to move troops into place to support that area, which is kind of important considering that it's a 600 mile front, and you can't cover everything. So a lot of it is about surveillance. And there's drone activity on both sides, as usual. A couple of new kind of drone-like things that are out there, a couple of new countermeasures being used on both sides. Some with better radar, others with sort of kludges, that is kind of do-it-yourself approaches to air-to-air combat. The Ukrainians have come up with attaching a automatic a standard automatic 12-gauge shotgun. I think something like a Remington 870 or something, and so it has limited number of rounds it can fire, but they've attached one, with guidance, etc., onto a drone, and so we're using that to shoot down other drones. There's now a fair amount of drone-on-drone warfare going up, which didn't happen before, but the air is lousy with drones, so that's kind of happening. And the usual drone and missile attacks still occur, but I think they've slacked off a bit considering this little Ukrainian incursion over the Russian border. This is the first time that the Ukrainians have decided to attack them. Oh boy, let's look at that.
Got it all finished. Boy.
Can't hear you, Joe. Joe, can't hear you.
How about now? Can you hear me?
No, still can't hear you.
Oh, damn it.
I hear you.
I hear him.
Oh,
okay. Maybe it's my fault. It's my fault. So. Okay. Carry on.
My headset's on the blink. Hopefully it's symmetric. Yeah, so I'll pop this in for about 20 minutes. So
what about what? 375, 350 Fahrenheit,
175
175 Celsius.
Celsius. And I even polished the oven door, so maybe we can get a glimpse of it.
Cool.
All good. Oh, I need a timer. Someone give me a timer. 20 minutes.
36 minutes after the hour presently. 36.
Cool.
So just about at the top of the hour if you're doing it for 20 minutes, right? By the time it ends, we'll get to see the damn thing. Right, Joe?
Say that again.
About the top of the hour is when you pull it out of the oven.
Okay.
Right?
Cool. Yep.
And of course,
Noted.
all such pies need to cool. So
No
that's
fancy
kind of the
plates.
way. Yes. On other matters, Trump says he might ban the abortion pill, just like Project 2025 wants. Today was the anniversary of Michael Brown's death, being shot by a cop in Ferguson, Missouri, sparking a horrible riot, among other things, burnt buildings at all. A couple car dealerships went up, those kinds of things. Needless to say, you could say that's the forward end of BLM, Black Lives Matter. And of course, the issue of George Floyd in Minneapolis being killed by a police officer is also, a continuation of those same kinds of stories within the context of the last election. Other things that are happening, as I said, there's the kind of stolen valor claim by Vance against Tim Walz, the most highly ranked enlisted person, non-commissioned officer, who's will be in the White House or in government, leading the country. This is it's an interesting precedent. And one important, and I think that a lot of veterans will identify with that kind of thing. It's very different than the average path that politicians take. They're usually, if they're lawyers and they had military service, they tended to be in the Judge Advocate General's office because of their law experience, and there is support. Do you need to have lawyers in the military? So usually that's the path. And so having someone who isn't an officer with some military experience is actually interesting. And I think, there is a kind of, not so much averageness, but a kind of normalcy to Tim Walz's history that is relatable for most of the country. It doesn't matter whether it is in the red states or the blue states in that particular context. It's a nice picture of the pie in the part in the oven, nice and shiny. So in our 20 minutes here, we could discuss a bunch of other things. It's pretty clear that there's a difference between Harris and Trump. A camouflage hat that says Harris Walz on it, in orange on top of it, kind of like the Make America Great Association red caps, etc. And there is a camo MAGA cap. Needless to say, they they announced it and it sold out. And of course, the Republicans think they have a they have a monopoly on the use of camo hats, and so they're quite annoyed. Tim Walz is a wing shooter, as some might say, shoots pheasant, I guess, or turkeys or whatever. So he is the best sharpshooter in Congress. Although I would say that Patrick he only became that perhaps because Patrick Leahy, senator from Vermont, retired, who is actually a target shooter. But anyway, enough of those sort of minor things. It's been pointed out in our comment section that Waltz is one of those guys who it's not hand to mouth, but he doesn't own any stocks. He has kind of an average middle class amount in the bank, and it's his wife is a school teacher, so he's a much more normal citizen politician as opposed to some other folks.
That Minnesota nice.
Minnesota nice. There is Minnesota
I was
nice.
I was just thinking the Fox News might accidentally promote the Rifle Association, and then all MAGA's going to freak out. But then it could be the greatest advertisement for members.
Indeed. It is the Democrat Farmer Labor Party in Minnesota. That's what it's officially called. It's not just the Democratic Party. And it is about farms and labor, important components of the history of Minnesota in that particular context. You could say that the GOP has nominated its own Baron von Munchausen, Munchausen by proxy in that sense. He's a bit of a fabulist, a liar. I'm sure that he would claim that his press conference was normal, very unnormal with all the lies and mistruths, etc. And Trump, the news of this week is that Trump ostensibly agreed to the 10th of September debate that was originally planned with Biden, and it's going to be on ABC. I'm not quite sure what the format is. It will, I think, have an audience, unlike the other one. So it will have be a little bit more wild. Anyway, I'm not sure whether Trump has made it to Bozeman yet. That's sort of an interesting thing. The neo-Nazi, anti-Semitic Nick Fuentes revoked his support for the Trump campaign. I think he's just bailing because he sees it's going to lose, not so much that Trump has really changed his ideological position at all. So that's another little thing that is part of our story here. Now let's see. Oh, the other thing that happened this week with the Trump campaign was that Trump in his presser claimed that he was in a air emergency with Willie Brown. Willie Brown is the former Speaker of the Assembly in the state of California and former mayor of San Francisco. And yes, dated Kamala Harris when she was a prosecutor. I'm not sure whether by the time she became district attorney, she was still dating Willie Brown. For those who don't know, Willie Brown was a bit of, as I think you could refer to it, he was a playa in terms of San Francisco sort of society. Needless to say, it was notable to the hoi polloi that Willie Brown, notable for his demand to have the California delegation seated many decades ago, many elections ago. Willie Brown, as you might perceive, is a black person, whereas the Trump story claimed to be about Willie Brown because they've been trying to do this thing, this negative campaign where they claim that the typical misogyny that Kamala slept her way to the top, which is, that's the thing. But I think she already had her position, and I don't think Willie Brown had anything to do with colluding or collusion. It was just simply, just everyday life, and she was single. so was Willie, needless to say, being a playa. But the reality is that Trump's little story about Willie Brown was just, well, the first thing, it was totally untrue. And secondly, it wasn't Willie Brown, but Jerry Brown, the ex-Jesuit, much taller, former governor, three-time governor of the state of California, who's a very white guy. And so it's even more bizarre about how Trump, put together this very strange lie of a flight emergency in a helicopter that never happened, and a just sort of this just strange juxtaposition of actual history, etc. But that was part of this past week. Quite weird, as you might say. Needless to say, there are other peripheral elements. I mean, there has been this sub-story that the second gentleman, before he met Kamala, had an affair with some person during his first marriage. So there's some other Trump-like extramarital hanky-panky, I suppose. But, what are you going to do? Trump has outdone Doug Emhoff by several degrees, needless to say. Trump having affairs with two of his three wives he had affairs with them while he was still married. So, whatever, all of these matters. So on that comparison, frankly, Republicans trying to make hay out of that is a little stupid as well. But, it is symptomatic of they're not having much to go for. And many of the pundits are having trouble trying to figure out what's going on with the Trump campaign. They do need to probably lie low as the Democratic convention comes up. Not much has been released about the format of the convention, because since they've already declared, who's going to win, et cetera, you don't have this sort of underlying conflict or agitation or activity. And so I'm curious whether it's going to be more sort of concert going, a primetime concert activity in terms of the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. Also, what kinds of protests, if there are going to be protests, in Chicago, I would guess that there are a variety of anti-war groups that will still protest, just as they did in Milwaukee when the Republicans were there. So, but they got very little press coverage, which is interesting for a variety of reasons. And we'll see whether that happens again in Chicago. It's clear, of course, it being summer in Chicago, and a regular kind of, Chicago-like activities will occur. So we'll see whether there's going to be an overlap of that kind of activity. And needless to say, there will be police. There will be probably the National Guard on reserve, et cetera, et cetera. So all of these things happen.
The question on the convention.
Yes.
Could it still be contested?
Yes.
Could other people bring up other candidates?
Are
there any other candidates?
I think it. Well, Marianne Williamson at last hearing could have been, but it's unclear whether that's going to be viable. It is all about procedures, needless to say. So I don't think you're going to get any opposition. And they've already chosen Harris. They just need to, they've already done that by virtual voting. So the only opposition could be to Walz as the vice president. So, you could circumvent the rules. There have been, in the history of conventions, there has been, resistance movements of one kind or another. But I think the Democrats are just simply happy that the momentum has shifted back, and that's a good thing. So that should minimize the kinds of issues of protests, et cetera. But I do expect some kind of anti-Israel Gaza thing to occur. And whether it turns into a kind of occupation city parks or something, and then counter demonstration. That's where you're going to get this violence, not unlike the ones that happened at UCLA somewhat recently, or Columbia, where counter protesters who are clearly driven by certain other interests and ideas will try and create trouble. So we'll see. It's just a question of scale. So Chicago being technically America's second city, although that's less so in the age of Los Angeles, but I think that could be an issue as well. But from a procedural thing, and actually one of our number, John Hayes is I think going to be there. So hopefully we'll have some on the ground reporting. Hopefully John will be safe and not in the middle of a protester counter protester sort of deal. And I'm hopeful for that. So that's coming up. As I was just saying, one of the J6 insurrectionists got 20 years in jail. It's the second longest sentence. So stuff's still happening. I'm going to assume that we're going to know by election day whether who actually was the bomber who placed pipe bombs at the Democratic and Republican headquarters in Washington, D.C. on January 6th. To me, that's the most interesting that will be probably the most interesting revelation of them all in that particular context. But we're approaching time where we have to do a little promo before the pie comes out, the tart comes out, and we're going to do The Prisoner tonight. I will host that. Hammer and Anvil is the episode. So TAC is going to be on at about 11. At 10 o'clock, we're having an open dialogue, but at 8:30, about less than 40 minutes from now, we're going to have a guided tour of the Twilight Zone. What episode are we going to see, Professor John?
Well, tonight, Professor Ann, we have The Self-Improvement of Salvador Ross, starring Don Gordon as Salvador Ross. I think it's a very interesting episode. And yes, Don Gordon. And I think it'll make for a good discussion.
Okay, bottom of the next hour. Do you want to promote the? We're watching Star Trek movies at the present moment. We've going through the first sequence of movies, and so I think we're up to number 5, right, John? On Sunday.
We are up to number 5, directed by the great William Shatner. I call him a great actor, not the greatest director, but yeah, this was his first feature film, I believe, and had some issues, but again, I think it will also make for an interesting discussion because they meet God.
Oh boy!
Yes,
there we go. The big guy himself.
The big man.
Flying spaghetti monster. Anyway, yes, indeed. Looking forward to that. That's Sunday afternoon at 5. Before that, we've been joining the Class Unity sessions on the 2008 financial crisis. I know that sounds not so exciting, but sometime perhaps this weekend or next, we're going to all watch The Big Short together. That's because Valley Box is on a slight hiatus. On Saturday, as I've mentioned before, Weekly Marks is on at 3 o'clock, and the Andy Higginbottom lecture just dropped this past week, so we'll watch that. They're up to chapters 18, 19, and 20. In volume 2 of Capital, and I know that sounds horribly unexciting, but it actually is, well, you had to have been there, I suppose. So that's happening. We have music on Saturday nights. Will we have music on Sunday nights? Is an interesting question. I don't know. Elaine, are we going to have music on Sunday night? Oh, I think Lane is off playing with Coco, so we don't get a preview of that necessarily. But we're hoping that we will have a little music. We usually have music later in the evenings, so that will happen on Saturday. That tends to happen. We show no cringe. Well, maybe not. Some of us like accordions, but anyway. So so Star Trek on the weekend, a little bit of Marx, of course, and maybe The Big Short if we schedule it in so that people can watch that stuff. We're putting more stuff in. It is a vacation month, so a lot of people are on holiday. Shop camp is occurring. Those of you who are more intimate with what we do in our pod, some of us have not been able to go to shop camp. I'm hopeful in a future shop camp we will do that. A lot of it is simply a logistics issue. People, who have enough budget resources to get to other places and to enjoy those kinds of things that we spend a little bit more time with. We yak with each other about homeowner issues of repair and sales and
the finer things in life.
All the miserable things about the everyday lived experience. So we do that crap too, and so we'll see whether those are coming up. Some of us are moving. Some of us may be, ejected from our locales, etc. So we try and keep track of all of those things.
Looks like we have a few more minutes in the oven here. The crust is just starting to brown. Few more minutes.
Yeah, flattened out nicely. Flattened out nicely.
Oh, we got a little bit of a juice issue.
Is it bubbling
the frangipani is raising, so I added a little bit of bicarbonate soda and an acid so that we get a little bit of a raise in the almond paste. So hopefully the traditional egg-based ones, you'll get a kind of crisp, airy, aerated almond filling. So I'm hoping that the bicarbonate soda mixed with the potato flour or corn flour will give it that little bit of a crispness on the edges.
Yum. Scratch pies or tarts or whatever. Is it a pie or a tart?
Well, that's a good question. It's called Früchtekake, which is a prince's cake, a princely cake.
It doesn't seem very cake-like.
It's essentially it's basically like a shortbread. It's like a Linzer tart made of almonds.
Yum. Damn.
So, I would say this is a tart, given the fruit. And I think
Indeed.
Lane would concur. I think that's one of the stipulations. Fruit being the defining characteristic of a tart.
Okie dokie. Let's see.
Do we have any questions in the audience?
Other than that, I'm going to pimp the Star Trek movie because this is the one where we see Commander Uhuru and dance in the All Together. Let's put it that way. In that, so come and watch that. If nothing else.
Nancy has her hand raised.
Nancy.
Yeah, I want to know if there's a difference between a tart and an open face pie.
Oh God, don't get Lane started.
Good thing Lane's being a perv, spying on those copulating hedgehogs.
Okay, well, maybe we'll,
I would say
we can-
tart is the open face, and a pie
Right.
would
Yes.
be
Right,
covered
right.
Oh my God.
because pies have to be covered.
Bloody
Oh boy.
hell.
Oh no.
Shut up.
no, but there are open
The
face
British are coming. The
pies.
British are coming.
Everybody, shut up. Pie is a manly thing.
Oh, gee.
The pie is gendered.
It's
So-
a manly thing. It speaks of the working man in the field. It may be made by the one, but it's a manly thing. Therefore, it must contain only savoury,
Meat.
and in fact, to be honest, only meat.
That is not
Right.
an American pie.
Insist.
Oh.
I'm not finished. You can find any pie in inverted commas which does not possess a lid. It's not a pie, no. It's at least a lidded tart. And a pizza isn't a pie; it's a pizza. That's why it's called a pizza.
Unless you're in Chicago,
Shut up.
it's called
You're wrong.
lasagna.
This is the law. This is the law of the pie. There. All wrong.
And of course,
If
tarts
I had
are
my
probably a more
phone,
gendered item.
I would look it up. I don't have my phone with me, but maybe.
No. You'd find this is my law. It is the law. I'm the king. I'm the
Lane's
lord.
law.
I'm the
Pie.
lord of the pie. Yes. Inns love pie.
And you know, the Cornish pasty is an enclosed thing. You know.
It is. It's sort of a stir. In fact, it could be considered a sturdy sandwich.
Yeah.
Sandwich, the
sort of a
sandwich. It's a bit.
Turnover.
It's a bit like globalism. It's got open borders. Things fall out of a sandwich. You bake that into some sort of short crust package. None of that spills out. You can carry that into the field or down the tin mine in Cornwall.
Can't carry
Then-
tacos into the mine.
Exactly. You've got a ready meal with an edible package.
Indeed.
How's that for your consumption and stuff?
Oh, joy, look at that pie. Yum, yum, yum.
Yeah.
All righty. Where we're coming up,
I'd say that's a tart.
It's a tart. It's not a pie, only.
Mm.
Does not possess a pastry lid.
And
And
it's
you
got
Americans
little,
have this weird thing.
little pricks around the crust. That's the
Flies.
chia seeds.
There you
So
go.
cut all that. There we go. Fish to cocktail with.
Susanna's pushing the boundary here with pie stroke tart. Nope, it's a tart. It's a tart. That even goes for your apple pie. It's got fruit in it. It's not a pie. That's a lidded tart. Tart with a lid.
Lidded.
Yes.
Indeed.
Go.
Well,
Yeah,
we're
and
coming
all
close
right.
to the end here. We're coming close to the end. Let's already pre-promise a priori that
Mm,
we're going to do better next week.
indeed.
Oh, by
Twilight
the way,
Zone is at the bottom. Twilight
I heard-
Zone at the bottom of the hour, folks.
I heard you ask earlier. I don't know what music I'm putting on tomorrow.
All righty.
I was predisposed on the loo.
Hope
Indeed.
everything came out all right.
Yes.
Oh.
See y'all.
Everything came out the end.